All right. Hi, everyone. I am going to make a hopefully not too long video on the Leviathan reading because it's just an interesting reading. It was a little bit long, and I don't know how many of you actually chose that reading for this course because it was an option to choose this one or John Rawls. But if you did, or if you didn't, you might want to watch this video just to know what it's about or what I think it's about. So there's a lot of content in the reading, and I am definitely not going to go through absolutely everything that is in there, but I just want to go through some of the things that I think are interesting and that I think you will benefit from me pointing them out. So again, for this ethics course, we're using this book, Ethical Theory, and the Leviathan reading is page 367 to 379. In Leviathan, as you can see in the slide here, was published in 1651, so quite a long time ago. The English is somewhat challenging in some sections, I thought, but not too challenging, nothing that, can't understand. All right. So I'll just do a summary of the points that I've found I personally think are more important and interesting in the selection in this book. And in the first sections, Hobbes starts talking about motives for human action. So ethical decisions are going to be leading into specific actions, and he wants to look into what motivates humans to act. And his theory is that we are quite simple. We are motivated to act by desire or aversion. So if we want an object, we desire it, the object's not present, we want it, we try to make it so that we have the object in our presence. If we don't like the object, we retreat from the object, we want to avoid it, right? So when the object is present, desire turns into love. So that's when the object is present, according to him. And if the object is present and you have an aversion towards it, then it turns into hate. So very simple psychology here. Now, when it gets interesting is that his theory is that what typically people call good and evil are just desires and aversions that they have. There's nothing more to it. There's nothing like sort of ultimately good or anything like that. People just have these desires and aversions, and what they want, then they desire, they call good, and what they retreat from, don't want, they hate when it's present, they call evil. All right. So he also talks about pulchrum and turpi, which are like two sort of Latin words, and it's also about the promises of good and the promises of evil. So it's not like he thinks that people are just looking to satisfy their desires and avoid their aversions on an immediate scale. He thinks that we also look for something that promises good, even if it's further away, or that something that avoids something that we have aversion to, even if it's not an immediate thing. So we look a little bit down the line for consequences of our actions and so forth. So yeah, like the traditional utilitarian thing where you say, oh, you go to the dentist even though it's painful because you want to avoid further pain. He also recognizes that. So what he thinks that humans do is they have these aversions and desires, which are different from culture to culture, person to person, social group to social group. They're even different, he thinks, in different times of your life. So you might have a desire for something in one time of your life, and in another one you don't. You have an aversion to it. So it's completely relative. Anyway, he thinks when people are thinking about action, they do something he calls deliberation. So they calculate what the consequences of this action is in terms of their desires, aversion, and what they want to avoid. And so they look a little bit down the line. They don't just look at the immediate consequences. They look in the future. And then once they come to a decision, they will the thing they want to do, and then they act. So you cannot will something that when you will something, then you act. And everything that you do, even if it's like forced on you, is still based on a decision that you made, because it's based on your, someone's threatening you, you have an aversion to getting, like, gone to prison, then you think about that, and then you will to not do that thing, and then you act. But it's not against your will. Everything you do is what you want to do, according to him. I mean, you want to do because you won't have these desires and aversions that you want to avoid or pursue. So that's how he thinks people are motivated, and that's how he thinks people act. And like I said, it changes from culture to culture, social setting, even each person can change. And he also says something kind of cool in this selection, which is that what people say they want to do really doesn't matter. People will say anything for other reasons. The way to know what people believe and what people want is by their actions, not by their words. And so there's a quote that I got here from the book. The best sign of the passions present are either the countenance, motions of the body, actions, and ends or aims, which we otherwise know men to have. So the best sign to know what people really want is by what they do, not by what they say. And he's a very, very cynical person. So that's part of, like, sort of his view on the world. People are not necessarily going to say what they really believe in. They might even be unconscious, right? Anyway, but you should look at people's actions to know what they want, what they desire, and what they want to avoid. Okay, he says there's nothing beyond desires and aversions to motivate people. And then another thing is that people want to pursue their desires and avoid the things they don't like, not just now, but in the future, like I said. But also, they want to create a situation where their desires are satisfied now and in the future, right? So you want stability. People want good income and so forth, so that they know that they can satisfy their desires in the future. That's why people plan ahead and so forth. All right. So they want to do whatever they can to, in the future, plan, guarantee their desires and avoid their aversions. And before there's like a social contract, he thinks that people are just thinking about these things, these desires, these aversions. Everyone has different ones. And what I want might not be compatible with what you want. And if there's no restraints, it would just be me trying to get what I want, you trying to get what you want, and we would probably clash. So this is what he calls a state of nature, where everyone is against everyone. He thinks that people in a natural state, because they have these crazy desires and aversions, and they're just going to try to pursue them, they would eventually inevitably fall into a state of war. And this state of war is not going to work itself out, he thinks, because he thinks that there's not going to be, say, one person that's going to be so much stronger and smarter than everybody else that's going to sort of dominate the group. Because even when there is a person that's stronger and smarter, the weaker members of the society will join forces and attack the, I don't know what's going on with it, and attack the strong ones. I'm going to correct that. And attack the strong ones. Yes. So people would do that. And so there's a quote from the section: for as the strength of body, the weakest has the strength enough to kill the strongest, either by secret machination, so if you like sort of conspire, or by confederacy with others that are in the same danger as himself. So eventually that's what would happen. And then, the one who lost, there would be other people that would come and challenge the group and so forth, and it would be never ending in a state of nature. In a state of nature, he thinks there would be no industry, no art, no culture, this is the famous quote, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So therefore, we need a social contract to avoid this horrible state of nature. Now, this is kind of interesting. I think that's what I just said is a traditional way to talk about Hobbes and state of nature social contract. But in the selection, he also puts it in a slightly different way. So the state of nature would be a state of freedom, absolute freedom. Everyone has a right to do whatever they want, and that would inevitably lead to war. When we reach a state of war, we don't want to continue that. So then we create laws and obligations to refrain others from attacking us, and then we achieve peace. What we want is to achieve peace because he calls it a natural law here in the book. The natural law is that we want to survive, we want to thrive, we want to have a sociable and comfortable living, and so therefore we want peace. And so we're willing to. So there's these different steps. Everyone wants peace if possible. We all want peace if possible. So we're willing to limit our freedoms and other people's freedoms to achieve this peace. And he says we should allow ourselves as much freedom as we would allow to others, right? So and he talks about that here, like sort of the Bible thing, do to others as you would have done unto you, or whatever, that golden rule. So that's the second step. And then we make contracts to restrain our natural freedom in a way to achieve peace. But his main point is that, yeah, that's all good. But once we have a contract, if all we have is someone's word, really there's not much guarantee that anybody's going to keep that contract. Especially since once you have someone's word that they're going to cooperate with you, the payoff, this is the prisoner's dilemma. So the payoff for not cooperating is so big that it would encourage people not to cooperate. So I won't go into that when we get to the prisoners. I'm not sure if in this class that we're doing right now, if there's prisoner's dilemma, but I can talk about that separately if there's any interest. But yeah, so he thinks contracts, if they're just sort of even words on paper, if they're not strongly enforced, they mean nothing. So you need a strong power to enforce those contracts. And this is how we argue for absolute monarchy, which is pretty crazy. And then John Locke kind of answered this in a very convincing way, which I can talk about at the end of this video a little bit if it makes sense. But that's his argument. All right. In ethics, what I think is quite interesting is that once he makes this argument, he takes the next step, which is to say that real moral laws, and he's not talking here about, we've already seen that he thinks what people think is right and wrong or good or bad are their desires, what they desire they think is good, and what they have aversion towards they think is bad. Those are regular, like sophisticated moral beliefs. But there's other moral laws that are objective. And those are means of this is a quote from Leviathan, means of peaceful, sociable, and comfortable living. Though that's the real, those are the real, those having that as a goalpost is what's going to create a real ethical principles that we should follow, not what regular people talk about when they talk about moral laws. Now, when I talked about objectivism and relativism, we saw that there are some theories that are objectivist, some are relativist. And then I said, I think in that video, I said that morality is kind of a vague term, that you could have some things that people call moral and they're going to be relative. And there's other things that people call moral and they might be objective. So morality is a really wide term. And I think Hobbes really recognizes this. And in his theory, the objective part is going to be whatever moral laws we come up with to have peaceful, sociable, and comfortable living. So they would be a result of deliberating during the social contract, right? And then you would see if it's really working to maintain peace. So if it is working, then that's objectively right. But you have to make a contract, and the goal has to be established, which is to have a peaceful and comfortable and sociable living. On the other side, regular moral beliefs that people have, his theory is that those are just based on aversions and desires, and they're just like sort of psychological inclinations that are completely relative. Like they could be relative to social status, they could be relative to culture, relative to country, and even, like he says, diverse on the same. I love that when he uses the word diverse. It's different for the same person over time as well. So it's like completely relative. So he kind of like breaks the waters in there and puts the objective moral law in whatever facilitates peaceful living. And then like at the end of the reading, I think is a really funny part where he compares humans and ants. So apparently, Aristotle put ants among the political animals, just like humans were political animals. Ants and bees, I think, in the political animals. And it's not that I was just looking it up earlier, and the reason it's not because they're gregarious. So Aristotle puts in like there's some animals that are gregarious, they just like hang out together, but they're really sort of individualists, so they don't really cooperate for anything. They're just like go around in herds and groups. But there's other animals that not only hang out together, but they build something together. So they construct a society together. They have an idea, not an idea, they work for the good of the group, that so to speak. So Aristotle did think that ants and humans were these kinds of animals. So humans also work for the good of the group and also work together and so forth. Obviously, not all the time. And that's what Hobbes is going to talk about here. So he gives 6 reasons why humans are not like ants, which I thought was hilarious. And you can see it at the end of the reading on page. It starts on page 378 and it's 379. And I just summarized them, but I would go and read it because I think the way he writes it is more funny. So the first reason is that humans compete for honor and dignity, and they feel envy, hatred, and they start wars. Ants don't do that. Second reason, humans separate private good from the common good, and they compare themselves with others. And this is really important, and is the reason why he thinks that humans need contracts, because they don't. They have a, their private good is not necessarily the common good, and common good is not necessarily private good. So they don't really see those two things as the same, like ants do. They instinctually just work together for the common good. And this is the prisoner's dilemma again, which I'll maybe share and make another video about. So how do we combine what makes sense rationally for the individual to what makes sense rationally for the group is the question that ethics is trying to answer. And he's a contractualist, and he thinks it won't happen naturally. We're going to have a contract, and we're going to have to enforce it on others. All right. Third reason why humans are not like ants. Humans, in case of humans, many individuals think of themselves better than others, and they want to be leaders, and they want to take over whatever decision making there is to do. And even so much so that they could end in civil war. Ants don't do that. Ants don't use language. Reason number 4, ants don't use language to lie and deceive. So they make sounds and so forth to communicate, but they don't use language to lie and deceive. They don't say that what they think is good is bad and what they think is bad is good, and humans do. And then 5, ants are not offended by other ants. And then 6, I'm joking, it's a kind of a little summary, but go and read it. And then the last reason is ants agree instinctually and humans need contracts. but they can only keep the contract if they have a strong enforcer. That's how he ends the comparison between humans and ants. And it's really funny. And I was looking at the internet and I did find, let me see if I can share with you. I did find this really funny website, the Daily Ant, where it's dailyant.com. And they have a philosophy section of ants and philosophy. So that could be cool. And there's all these different articles. I was looking at an article about ants and Hobbes, and I don't see it. So maybe I'll write one and submit it to this website because I don't know. I think that's just fascinating. Ants and philosophy. Who knew? I didn't know. Now I do. All right. So just to end this little video, and again, I didn't want to be too long, but I think I mentioned earlier that we were taught that John Locke is a philosopher that answered Hobbes. And the way Locke answers Hobbes is quite simple. If you go back to this section here, you see that what motivates people, he says, is to achieve peace, right? So people want to achieve peace if possible. And he thinks this is the best way to achieve peace, going through all these different steps, right? So this is how it's motivated. Now, what John Locke is going to say is he is wrong. This is not the best way to achieve peace. In fact, if you have a totalitarian government, let me just close the window because they're making some noise. Okay, I'm sorry. If you have a totalitarian government, you're not going to achieve peace. You're going to achieve constant civil war, is what Locke's going to say. And the best way to achieve peace, Locke's going to argue, is through democratic government, because you can change power without a revolution. So you can just have like a 4-year or whatever, how many years in each country elections are, a peaceful transition of power, an opportunity for a peaceful transition of power. So he does not agree that this is the best way to achieve peace. And, you can think for yourself whether Hobbes' system is the best way to achieve peace or John Locke. But still, I think he's kind of a very interesting writer. There's a lot of parts of it that are really fun to read. He's very, very suspicious of other humans, obviously, and but still an interesting writer. And this reading, I think, is an interesting reading, even though it's a little bit long and maybe some parts of it more obscure than others. There's some parts here that there's a section here that I don't understand at all, but I'm going to look into it about distributed justice, and I don't understand what he's saying because this is not what I typically understand by about these terms. Anyway, but again, this is just like a little selection from the things I find interesting in this reading, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you. I think in the discussion board we have a couple of posts about this already. All right, I'll see you soon. Bye.